Have you ever wanted a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, you have come to the right place, because you are listening to C&C Talks.
Hello everyone, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to the C&C Talks podcast. This is episode 11 of season 2.
And just a reminder, as you do every week, we release every Wednesday, and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. There's currently Monday, March 27th, 2023, at about 6 p.m. Pacific time.
And coming up on this episode, very, very busy episode, the Trump indictment possibilities, March Madness, World Baseball Classic. We're going to preview the MLB season and a whole lot more. And Charlie, we're going to start with some news that just broke earlier today as of this taping, a couple days ago when this episode was released. Tragic news out of Nashville, Tennessee, where there was another school shooting that left 3 kids dead, and these kids were elementary school age.
Yeah, from preschool to 6th grade, and yet again, it's the same thing. Again, is anyone surprised?
No one's surprised, but let's take a look at Tennessee for a moment, Charlie. Tennessee's big thing in the last several months has been trying to ban drag queens because they want to, quote-unquote, protect the children. Do you know how many people have died from drag queens in the state of Tennessee?
I can't imagine very many.
Zero. Do you know how many people have died from gun violence?
I don't know, probably 30?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot, and that number grew by 3 today, and they were children.
Like, was it 6?
Elementary school age children. I think it was 3 kids, 6 people in total, including the shooter, I believe. And yes, and obviously the Republicans saying all the same stuff. I'm absolutely heartbroken. Thoughts and prayers to the people affected, but they do not give a word that I'm not going to say. They don't. Otherwise, they would be quick to take action so that nothing like this could ever happen again, but they won't because they don't care about the children. They care about the money that is flowing into their pockets from the NRA.
And may I add the fact that they've been spending the last few weeks trying to ban TikTok.
Oh, don't get me started on that, because is it the right thing to do? Maybe. There's definitely big problems with TikTok, but you could be banning assault weapons, and you're instead focusing on a social media app. Give me a freaking break. I am so tired of this.
Let's move on now to several investigations into Donald Trump, so even more bad news and chaos in the U.S. Bad news if you're a supporter, good news if you want him to go to prison.
Yeah, and obviously 3 major cases into Trump. We'll start with the one in New York, where there's an indictment that could come down really any day, we expect. This is, of course,
admittedly, that's what we said last week.
It is when we were recording last week. This is in the Stormy Daniels case, the alleged hush money payments that he made to Stormy Daniels to cover up his affair. Those could have been criminal payments. It looks like he could be indicted very soon for those payments, which is, of course, getting Republicans to freak out. Trump, of course, calling for violence. What are your thoughts, Charlie, on this particular case? And then I have a lot of thoughts also.
Well, we have to be careful because, of course, last time he suggested we have violence, January 6th happened. This is a very dangerous person, and we have to be very careful of his actions moving forward. However, it does seem that this time the forces that he, shall I say, garners are less powerful and are less organized, which is crucial, that we know of anyway so far.
Yeah, 3 points on this, and I kind of said the same thing when we were taping this last week, but so I've heard a lot of Republicans that have been saying, well, if they can do this to Trump, they can do this to you. Charlie, that's the point. If you commit crimes, you can be held accountable for those crimes, right? That's what it means to be a nation of laws. If you break the law, you get arrested. Everybody must be held to that same standard. And the very fact that Republicans are saying this should be very concerning to us all, because that is a suggestion that they think that Trump should be above the law.
Yeah, it just makes no sense, does it?
Yeah. Second point, which is that some on the right have suggested that Trump is going to jail because Democrats dislike him, or that he's maybe going to jail because the prosecutors disagree with him politically. Yes, I'm sure it's true that Democrats dislike him. I'm also sure it's true that the Manhattan District Attorney disagrees with Donald Trump politically. But that's not why he's being arrested. He's being arrested because of, well, how the legal system works. The Manhattan District Attorney believes that there is enough evidence to suggest that he committed crimes. That's it. That he's disliked, that he's a bigot, all the rest, that's got nothing to do with it. Not even the reason Democrats are mainly celebrating, right? Trump wants Hillary Clinton in jail because of her political views. That's authoritarian. Democrats want Trump in jail because he committed crimes or upholding the law, right? It's very simple and a completely disingenuous attack. And that leads into my final point, which is that, yes, when Trump does get indicted, if he gets indicted, but more likely when he gets indicted, it will be a good day in our country, in that one of the biggest criminals in our nation's history is finally being held responsible for his crimes. But it's also a very solemn day for our country, Charlie, because it's solemn that somebody who was elected president of the United States was a criminal. It should be less of a moment of celebration and more of a moment to reflect on what our country is, what we as a country stand for, right? Because before the 2016 election, we knew exactly who Trump was. He was a con man, someone who had failed at every single thing he had tried to do in his life, but somehow managed to lie and cheat his way out of it. He cheated on his taxes. He cheated on the SAT. He cheated his way out of Vietnam. He cheated on all 3 of his wives. He never took any blame. He put it on every other person around him. Everybody who has ever associated themselves with Trump has gotten in trouble legally or financially or both because of it. Everyone who crossed him in any way was attacked relentlessly by him. He is a racist, sexist, homophobic bigot, and everyone knew it. And yet, 63 million people voted for him. And then while in office, shocker, he turned his racist beliefs into law. He continued to lie to the public. He lied tens of thousands of times, Charlie, more than any president ever. He sucked up to all of our adversaries, North Korea, Russia, all the rest. He used the office for personal gain and tried to extort a foreign government in an attempt to win an election. He ended up getting impeached for it. He intentionally misled the public on COVID, and as a result, hundreds of thousands of people needlessly died. He called the military losers and suckers. He tanked the economy, presiding over the worst net job growth in modern times. He managed to lose jobs. And he declared war on the press and the First Amendment as a whole, and created more division in America than we've had since the Civil War. And did I mention that he lied? And after all of that, 74 million Americans looked at the complete and total train wreck that was the Trump administration and said, give me 4 more years of that. And that's not even counting what he's done since the election on November 3rd of 2020, and such as January 6th. So yes, him being held responsible for just one of his many crimes is, in some ways, yes, a cause for celebration, even though it should have happened a very, very long time ago, before he even got into office. But we also need to just look back and acknowledge this is what we as a country enabled. We let one of the biggest criminals in U.S. history into the White House. That is who we as a country are at the moment until we prove otherwise. And if we don't acknowledge it and make sure that it doesn't happen again, it will, but worse. So those are my 2 cents, Charlie. Let's move on.
All right, let's move on now to the Trump investigation in Georgia, where, of course, he's under investigation there for telling Georgia officials to find him the votes to give him the state of Georgia in the 2020 election, which, of course, I don't need to state, is vastly illegal.
Yeah, it looks like we could be moving towards an indictment in that one soon, but then there's also, Charlie, probably the biggest one is that special counsel investigation, the Maine Justice Department, into the classified documents and into January 6th. And this one could be really big because Jack Smith, the special counsel, has just managed to break attorney-client privilege and compel Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran to testify against Trump, as well as break executive privilege for several other former Trump officials and get them to testify. So this case could be heading places very soon. This is really ramping up.
And we shall see how this continues as it develops.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Putin, Charlie.
Putin has been indicted by the International Criminal Court, which means he is officially a criminal everywhere. At least the countries that follow the International Criminal Court, which may be at Russia and the US, both do not.
Yeah, they both do not. So it really doesn't mean anything unless he does leave Russia. And frankly, he's not going to do that anyway because there's sanctions on him all over the world.
Speaking of Putin, there was a meeting between Putin and Xi, the leader of China. Last week, they met and had some discussions. Colin, can we get a bit more on exactly what they talked about?
Yeah, so this seems, at least both sides, China and Russia, claim that this was about potentially negotiating some sort of peace with Ukraine, which is interesting that Russia's now saying that that may be part of it, because that's not something that you would think that they would want to admit, that they might need a peace deal instead of just being able to take the country. Who knows what they actually met about? But it'll really be interesting to see, Charlie. Is Zelensky and the rest of Ukraine open to a peace deal? Because, frankly, Ukraine...
I doubt it.
In some ways, Ukraine's winning the war, but in some ways, I also feel like we're heading towards a stalemate, Charlie, because Ukraine, we think, has a counterattack, a pretty big counterattack coming sometime later this spring, and that could amount to something, but what if it doesn't? What if they just kind of stay stuck right where they are? And, I mean, it's not like...
Russia wins the war of attrition, then.
What does victory look like for either side?
Well, the Russians can't really do anything. They've exhausted basically all their offensive strength that they have. And the Ukrainians, I think, probably have one last solid push in them. And if that doesn't go anywhere, we're in for some solid frontline attrition warfare. And if it gets to attrition warfare, I don't see any way that Ukraine can win.
I don't see a way Ukraine can win, but I don't see how Russia can win either. I mean, they could take the territory, but then do what with it? You have to govern Ukrainian people that do not want to be governed by Russia. How do you solve that if you're Russia?
And you're still embargoed by the entire world.
You're still embargoed by the entire world. And even if the rest of the world maybe gives up, or at least lets up somewhat on their support of Ukraine, which I think is possible that they might do if this counterattack doesn't do much, because they don't want to keep sending aid for an infinite amount of time, there's still not going to be friendly with Russia. So it just seems like a situation with no clear end game, and that is frankly pretty concerning for world peace as a whole, I think.
Yeah, moving on, we have yet more chaos in Israel as Netanyahu's government continues to have disaster after disaster. Massive protests of upward of 800,000 people were marching through the streets of Israel today to protest Netanyahu's government attempt to destroy the judiciary of that country. Can we get a little bit more on exactly what happened?
Yeah, so it seems like Netanyahu is letting up somewhat. He says that they're going to postpone, keyword postpone, not cancel, postpone this vote on this particular piece of legislation, which is obviously extremely corrupt. But Charlie, I think that that's less because of the protests and more because it really feels like Netanyahu's government is collapsing.
It may.
So what does that mean for Israel and that entire region as a whole?
Well, we got to be careful, because if Israel's looking like they may be under threat, they may be attacked by all of their neighbors who, as we know, historically do not have the best relationship with them.
Do not. I mean, we're talking Syria, Iran, Egypt, all of those countries. And
of course, those stem from the religious differences between those countries,
of which there are many.
Moving on as well, yet more chaos is in France as well over a controversial retirement bill made by President Macron and his government, causing yet more huge protests. that law was forced through, and there are still massive protests in France as well. That is a developing story. We'll talk about that more definitely next week as things develop.
So has it officially been passed, that
I
legislation
believe so.
in France? It's interesting. And also, we've been talking a lot in the past few weeks about protests, and they're really happening all over the world. And let me just say, as long as protests are peaceful, keep it up, people, right? That is your right. Even if I don't agree with what you're protesting, you have a right to protest peacefully. That is how a, a major way where people are able to express themselves and push for change. So don't let anyone stop you from protesting. If you believe in something, be willing to go out in the streets and protest for it.
All right, and let's move on to some announcements. We have an announcement. Our bloopers for the first 3 months of the year will be coming out on the last day of the month, March 31st. So be on the lookout for that. That's exclusively on YouTube on the last day of the month at noon.
Yeah, and also a big announcement, Charlie, which is that we have decided for at least the next several months to be moving the podcast permanently to Wednesday. We're still going to be taping mostly on Mondays, but we've just normally in the evening, we've just decided that it's just a lot easier for us to have that extra day. We really need it. So still episodes coming out basically every week, but now on Wednesdays. So just a heads up on that. Listening to the C&C Talks podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Now let's move on to sports.
All right, let's get it started with March Madness. Chaos as it always is. We are now down to the final four in both brackets. Let's get your reaction to some of the most nuts things that have happened in both these tournaments so far.
Okay, so let's start in the men's bracket.
We have no 1 seeds. We have no 2 seeds. We have no 3 seeds.
Charlie, do you know the last time that happened?
Can't imagine.
Never. It's never happened.
Wow.
There's a 9 seed, 2 5 seeds, a 4 seed. UConn's the 4 seed. We've got Miami and San Diego State as the 5 seeds. Florida Atlantic, an insanely impressive run. Also, they're the 9 seed, also into the Final Four. What an incredible tournament it's been so far. We saw Gonzaga, Charlie, your pick, get knocked off by UConn by 28 in the Elite Eight.
And your team lost in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, Houston lost in the Sweet 16 to Miami. Texas in the Elite Eight blew a huge lead. Then there was also some down-to-the-wire games. That San Diego State-Creighton game, Charlie, insane.
Oh, that was a great game.
I mean, we haven't even talked about the earlier rounds. I mean, that Gonzaga-UCLA game.
FDU Princeton. FDU Purdue.
FDU Purdue, a great game, and I cannot say enough praise about FDU. It's not going to happen again, probably. Obviously, their coach leaving for Iona now, who Charlie picked to go deep in this tournament, and that didn't happen. But I don't know. A wild tournament as a whole. Princeton obviously getting really far as well, all the way to the Sweet 16. Just a great tournament, Charlie.
Yeah, and we'll continue to see, especially on the men's side. What about the women's side? What are you thinking there?
Women's side was also wild in some ways, right? Stanford and Indiana, both 1 seeds going out in the second round. Last time a 1 seed in the women's bracket didn't make it to the Sweet 16. 2009. UConn on the women's side, they got eliminated in the Sweet 16. Last time that they didn't make it to the Final Four, 2009. So it's been a minute.
But I assume you still
great tournament. Iowa, can't say enough about Caitlin Clark. Also, a 40-point triple-double. Never happened before in either the men's bracket or the women's bracket.
But you have to imagine that South Carolina still is the huge favorite.
South Carolina, you said?
Yes.
Oh yeah, South Carolina. I've got to imagine that they can win it all, but I'm really looking at that South Carolina-Iowa game that looks like now we're going to probably see in the Final Four. That might be the national championship, because I think who wins that game will probably win the national championship. That's, of course, Friday night, I believe.
And another event that happened just last week was the World Baseball Classic. What
well,
a final game that was.
and not just the final, all the games. I mean, we had that insane U.S.-Venezuela game in the quarterfinals, I believe.
Yes,
We
the
had that
quarterfinal.
absolutely nuts Mexico-Japan game that Japan walked off. And then that Japan-USA game, the final at bat. That
Trout
was ridiculous.
and
You could not
Ohtani.
have written up a better ending for that.
Scripted.
Yeah, I gotta feel like that will not be the last time we see Ohtani versus Trout. Potentially as early as 2024, when they're wearing opposite uniforms in Major League Baseball.
Trout to the Yankees confirmed.
I think it's more likely we see like Ohtani to somewhere. He could sign it. There's a lot of places that would love to have Shohei Ohtani on their teams.
Well, literally everyone.
I'm not sure that the A's would go all in, but just about anyone else.
Well, except the Angels.
There's no chance that he goes back to the Angels, I think. I think he is extremely fed up with that franchise, and frankly, I would be too.
So speaking of baseball, we had a couple of big injuries during the World Baseball Classic with Edwin Diaz specifically being injured in a celebration after a game.
Yeah. Diaz getting injured, obviously tragic. He's out for the entire season. Altuve also getting injured, Charlie. He'll be out till probably June. So really unfortunate for him, but you got to think that that impacts the division race as well. So let's get into a preview for this season, Charlie. Let's rank some of these divisions. Start with like the NL West. That's a great division.
All right, I'm gonna go. I think the Padres are winning that division.
I think that they're going to win the division, the Padres.
I think the Padres will win the division, then the Dodgers. Then I don't know. The other three teams are kind of weird. I'm gonna go the Giants, and then the D-backs, and then the Rockies.
So believe it or not, I've got the same order. Let's start at the very bottom of that division with the Colorado Rockies. They're a disaster.
All right, and then you also have the Diamondbacks in fourth.
Diamondbacks in fourth. Yeah, I think that they made some good moves. I'm still not entirely sure why though. They didn't make enough moves to get into contention. They're starting to get an older roster. Not entirely clear what their goal is right now, at least to me. But hey, maybe they'll come out of nowhere and shock some people.
And then you have San Francisco at 3.
Yeah, I do. I think that they're actually pretty close to the Diamondbacks, closer to the Diamondbacks than they are to the playoffs, at least.
And then Dodgers at 2, Padres 1.
Yeah, what's your reasoning for putting the Padres above the Dodgers? Because I kind of feel the same way.
I just don't know if the Dodgers can keep it up, and I really like that Padres team. If they can keep their players healthy, which, I mean, that's always a concern concerning who they got on their roster. I think it is possible. But if everyone stays healthy, I think that Padres team could make a deep run.
Yeah, I mean, Tatis, obviously, we'll see what he is once he comes back from that suspension that has to finish off for the first 20-ish games of the season. I was not impressed with the Dodgers offseason. I think that there's some reasons behind it. I think that they might be interested in getting into a bidding war for Ohtani next offseason. But they let go of Trey Turner and Justin Turner this offseason. They didn't really add anyone big. Plan was for Gavin Lux to be their starting shortstop. Now he's out for the season, and it looks like they're going with Miguel Rojas, which no respect to him, but that's not exactly the move. So, I mean, the Dodgers could just pull a rabbit out of a hat, but I think right now the Padres are just on paper the better team.
All right, let's move on to the AL West now.
Yeah, so who do you got in fifth place in this division, Charlie?
That's the easy answer. That's the Oakland Athletics.
Does anything even more need to be said on that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either. The A's are an absolute mess. Fourth place, this is kind of interesting because there's a couple teams you could pick. Who do you think is going to come in fourth?
I'm going to go Texas.
Yeah, I also got to feel like Texas is that fourth place team. And let's start, Charlie. I really, really liked their offseason this year. They had a great offseason.
But it's just not enough.
Their bullpen's a major concern to me. The bottom half of their lineup's a major concern. And the rotation's pretty darn good on paper, but Can DeGrom stay healthy? Can Martin Perez repeat the amazing season that he had last year? These are all questions that really I need to see answered before I can say, yes, the Rangers are a good team. But no, they definitely had a pretty good offseason.
And then third, I have the Angels.
Yes. The Angels, it's really, really difficult to talk about the Angels, right? Because
they have two great players and a bunch of other people.
Their lineup is actually pretty darn good. I mean, you've got it's not just Ohtani and Trout. You've got like players like David Fletcher, who's decent, Taylor Ward, decent, Rengifo, decent, Rendon could be great, could be a disaster. So their lineup actually looks pretty good if you put it all together, but also it's the Angels and the chances of them actually putting it all together are about 0. So yeah,
and then second,
that's it.
This was very close for me, considering the offseason moves and preseason injuries. I have to go Seattle though.
I have to as well. It's pretty close. Seattle definitely closed the gap somewhat there. Aided, of course, by Altuve being injured. The Astros didn't make a huge move. They obviously lost Verlander. They did get Jose Abreu, but Seattle had the better offseason. Is it enough? I don't think so.
But Seattle is usually full of surprises. We'll see what they do.
We'll put it this way, Charlie. If Jared Kelenic can turn himself into a legit everyday player, the Mariners will win the AL West, and they will be among the World Series favorites.
We'll see. All right, let's move on to the AL Central.
This is an interesting division.
This entire division is mid.
Is mid, exactly. I feel the same way.
Is mid to bad.
All right, we'll start with 5th place. Tigers, Royals, or someone else?
I'm going to have to go with the Royals.
I went back and forth on this for like an hour earlier today. I'm going to contradict you for the first time this show, though.
You're going with the Tigers?
Yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see. I think that they have a little bit of promise, but they're still a bad team, guys.
I think they're going to be. I think those two teams are going to be super close, and I think in the long run, it's not going to matter because they're both going to be sub 65 win teams.
And it doesn't really matter for draft pick anyway because there's a lottery now.
Yeah.
Royals though I have finishing 4th. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to have a decent season. That's really the only reason I'm going to pick them to finish that high.
And then 3rd between.
Oh, it's the White Sox. You don't even need to ask. The White Sox are 3rd.
Oh, no, absolutely.
The very definition of mid.
Basically every year.
Oh, yeah.
They're just okay every single time.
Oh, yeah, no. Okay, White Sox, if there's any White Sox fans listening, don't get your hopes up about this season. I've seen stranger things, but you guys aren't making the playoffs.
All right. What about who you got in second then between the Twins and Guardians?
Still the Twins. Still the Twins to me.
Yeah, I
Didn't
just
do enough.
Don't see it. Minnesota's gotten closer.
Is Correa going to be healthy though? That's a question mark.
Yeah, but are the Guardians going to be able to have a good pitching production this year?
No, that's a good question from the Guardians also do they still have Zach Plesac, by the way?
I think they do.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
His last 3 seasons have ended by either dumb injuries or breaking COVID protocols. So.
Okay, and then looking at the NL Central, in last, I presume you have the Reds?
Yeah, so I think that the Reds actually finished ahead of the Pirates last year, unless I'm mistaken.
Did they?
I think so. They obviously had that like 2-23 start or whatever it was. The Reds did.
They were projected at that pace. They were going to be finished with the worst record of all time.
But of course, they didn't keep on that pace. This year, they're going to be bad though, and they're going to be the worst team in that division. If Jake Fraley's hitting second in your lineup, you've got a problem.
Okay, they tied. They both had 62 wins.
So 100 lost seasons for both of them. Yeah, the Reds might improve on that by like a game or 2.
So you have the Pirates in 4th then.
Yeah, no, Brian Reynolds is good. O'Neal Cruz could I actually think that he has a great profile going forward. They at least
All right.
have something to build on, whereas the Reds are just a smoking wreck.
Third, you have, I presume, Chicago.
Yeah, another team that I don't know. I do not know what their intention was this offseason.
Both of the Chicago teams are just weird.
They're weird. No, wait, what's the Cubs' goal? Tell me right now, what's their goal?
75 wins, probably.
Not like their general manager looking at it this offseason. What was he trying to do? He went after Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger, and like there's some good players. Well, maybe Cody Bellinger, but it's not anywhere close to enough. And frankly, that's probably a division where there's only one spot in the postseason. So, what's your plan here, guys?
Yeah. So then
Brewers are
Brewers are
Cardinals.
second, Cardinals are first. That's pretty simple.
Yeah. No, the Cardinals. When you have two MVP, I almost just said if you have two MVP candidates on your roster, how are you not gonna win the division? But then I remembered that the Angels exist.
Yeah, you should remember that.
Yeah, I definitely should have.
So let's move on to the East now. Let's do the NL East first.
It's loaded.
Well, the top three are.
Four's not bad either.
Well, I have
they're
the
not
Nats
good, but they're not bad.
I have the Nationals in last.
The Nationals. Here's the thing. Okay, so on Thursday on our Twitter account at C&C Talks Podcast, Thursday morning, I'm going to be posting a power rankings 30 through 1 to open the season. Give you a little preview right now. Nationals are, in my opinion, number 30. They're that bad.
Marlins at 4. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, but I think that they made a step forward.
Certainly, but they're not going to challenge any of the top 3.
Oh no, they struggle from both playing in a loaded division and also just not being good enough.
So then Phillies at 3?
Yeah, I was tempted to put them at 2, but then Rhys Hoskins got injured, and then I remembered Harper was out for part of the season, so yeah, Philly at 3.
And then New York at 2 and Atlanta at 1?
New York Mets fans are not going to like me for this, but you are the second best team in that division, and you guys are going to get knocked in the first round of the playoffs again. Sorry, it's going to happen.
I think the Braves might be the best team in the league.
Oh, quite possibly. The additions that they made this offseason. I mean, nothing major, but Sean Murphy's a legit addition. Then you get another year of Michael Harris Jr. and Spencer Strider, who are only going to get better, assuming health. You've got Charlie. You've got this entire team locked up for like a decade.
Yeah, and then looking
did I mention
finally,
that they get Ozzy Albies back?
You did not, but that's true as well. And then looking at the AL East, Red Sox are bottom.
Yeah, we kind of went back and forth on this. Red Sox are bottom, though. I ultimately come to the Orioles didn't do much this offseason, but it's better than what Boston did.
And then I don't think Tampa did enough to improve.
No, they're still 3. Baltimore's 4th. They're 3.
I have New York at 2 and Toronto at 1.
Same. The Yankees, what's their offense right now? That's
Their
the biggest question.
Their offense is Aaron Judge, and that's it.
But is he going to be able to repeat what he did last year? What he did last year was insane. Don't get me wrong.
Their entire
arguably
offense,
the greatest offensive year of all time.
And we also need to mention the fact that they only have 2 starting pitchers at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Severino and Rodon will be back at some point, but Montes is out for the year. And what if Cole is what he was last year, which was not an ace? He wasn't terrible, but he was not an ace.
All right, now let's move on. Finally,
they're a mess.
Let's move on to the UEFA Champions League. I'll let Colin take that segment.
Yeah, the UEFA Champions League round of 16 concluded. Is 2 legs, of course, happening over the span of about a month, and there was some big ones. Real Madrid took down Liverpool, Charlie. That's a big one. PSG also going out. Napoli taking down SGE. Inter Milan taking down FC Porto. Man City absolutely crushing RB Leipzig in that. As I mentioned, PSG going down to Bayern Munich again. Tottenham going down to AC Milan, and Beneficia taking down who is that team? Club Brugge, and Chelsea taking down Dortmund.
Well, and
So
speaking of
coming up soon.
And speaking of Tottenham, their boss has just been fired.
Has he?
Yeah, so
What did he do wrong?
well, it's Tottenham, so they're always a mess.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, NFL free agency. That's big, Charlie. A lot
Aaron
of big
Rodgers
moves. Start with Aaron Rodgers.
Will probably at some point, sometime before the season starts, get traded to the Jets. We don't know where, we don't know when, but maybe.
Maybe, yeah. The Jets could be a good
the
team, though.
The interesting thing, though, is the Jets have absolutely no leverage here.
No, they don't. The Packers hold the leverage.
And if they can't get that trade deal done, the Jets fans are going to burn MetLife down.
Oh, yeah. Yes, they are.
And Bobby Wagner is going to return to Seattle.
Yeah, I feel like he's definitely not the player he was, but they're still looking at a pretty darn good player. And Lamar Jackson now demanding a trade.
But does anyone want him?
I wouldn't want him on my team. Now, let me explain. He's a very, 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 very good quarterback. One of the best in the league. When healthy, I could make an argument that he is a top 3 quarterback in the league. But 2 things. The first is, I said when healthy. That's not common, and it has to do with his style of play. Secondly, it's that he was not willing to play in the playoffs for his team because he didn't have a long-term deal. Who does that? Would you want that person on your team, Charlie?
No.
No, so I don't blame any team that does not want him right now. I mean, I don't blame the Ravens for trying to tag him either, but it's an interesting situation there.
Yeah, something that I do think is kind of crazy is the fact that a lot of these teams are replacing mediocre quarterbacks with a low upside with more quarterbacks who are mediocre and don't have high upside. Yep. The Saints got rid of Andy Dalton and replaced him with Derek Carr. Baker Mayfield is now in Tampa.
Oh, brother.
Carolina's doing something.
No one knows what.
And I believe Atlanta got rid of Marcus Mariota and got Taylor Heineke.
I don't mind Desmond Ridder, though. I feel like he could legit be something if they're willing to play him for a couple years.
Speaking of which, the draft is in exactly a month, and it looks like we're out of time for this episode.
Yeah, so real quick before we go, Charlie, World Series prediction. Who wins it all?
My World Series prediction. Man, this is difficult. I'm gonna go Braves Astros. Braves are winning it.
A rematch of 2021. Okay. Yeah. I don't like betting for the Padres in the postseason. I think that they're gonna get to the World Series, and you know what? I think that they're gonna win it as well. Over who? We'll say the Blue Jays.
All right.
Yeah, we are out of time, so long episode today. Make sure that you subscribe. We have new episodes coming out every Wednesday. Remember that now. Available wherever you listen to your podcasts, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. So subscribe to us wherever that is that you like to listen. Visit our website, cctalks.net, to learn whatever you want to know about the show, including you can ask us questions there or call us with them at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. We may answer your question on the podcast. And follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. For our producer Morris, production designer Zach, and proof editor Drake, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. See you next week.
Thanks for listening.